Hi everyone. So I graded all of the exams from last weekend, and good news, everyone passed. There's a couple things I wanted to go over with all of you though. Um, I'm just going to go over each one here real quick. So if someone has lost their cervical lordosis, list two possible causes. The kyphosis of the T-spine, yes. And then someone put scap dysfunction. Well, yes, scap dysfunction, but I want something more specific. And that could be, if it was scap dysfunction, that could be elevated scaps, like severely, which would coincide with the kyphosis. So that was one thing I wanted to clarify. And then 9A and B. So someone has more development tonicity in the left paraspinals. List two torsal deviations that may be present. One would be rotation. Which direction? It would more than likely be right to left rotation, and then it could also be a lateral flexion, but lateral flexion a little bit more toward the left side if there was more development. So those are two on this exam. Again, everyone did really well. I was pretty excited about that. 8, there was 2. So on this one, we did... So if someone has a depressed scapula, list 3 possible deviations that could cause the depression. You may include the pelvis. This particular person said elevated pelvis, asymmetrical scap, elevation depression. Well, that's kind of the question I asked, right? And then torso rotation. So number 2, I'd want to be more specific than that. So yes, asymmetrical scap, but what would it be? It would probably be one maybe more abducted than the other. Which one? If there was an elevation, that could be more abducted. So there's an elevation of the scap and abduction. That would be the answer for that. Another one could be elevated pelvis. Could be a rotated pelvis. So there was a lot of answers to that one. 9B, which was someone has more development tonicity in left paraspinals. List 2 deviations that may be present. Again. So rotation right to left and lateral flexion left to right. There wouldn't be a lateral flexion left to right. It would be a lateral flexion left. Not only thing when we say left to right, that typically means a rotation. 11, number 1. List the possible torso deviations that can cause an elevated scapula. Lateral flexion, and then this particular person put scapular depression. Yes, I mean that technically, I guess you can say that. An asymmetrical depression elevation. Well, yes, but again, I was looking for something more specific than that. We know that it's asymmetrical depression or elevation and the question was just one elevated scapula. So. What you may see is lateral flexion. That's the correct answer. Then number 2, it possibly could be a rotation, right? So if you are rotating right to left torso, that right scap could go for the ride where it's going to ride up and abduct. And then 14. So this is number 14. If you work with someone that has scoliosis, explain why it's important to evaluate the pelvis. Well, it's important to evaluate the pelvis because typically with scoliosis there's going to be a lateral curvature. The lumbar curvature, lateral-wise, that could be because of an elevated pelvis, right? So if you wanted to start with the elevated pelvis, get that neutral, you might be able to change some of the deviations of the spine just simply by getting that elevation out of there. So that was the answer to that. Number 13, this particular person, so 13, explain how a pelvic deviation can cause an elevated scapula. This person said an elevation of the scapula could cause the torso to laterally flex away from the elevation and the scap to elevate on the same side of the laterally flexed torso. Now, that is correct. However, typically what you're going to see, if you see a lateral flexion of the torso, typically the shoulder is going to depress on that side. If you see a lateral shift, now that's going to be more of angled over, and then this shoulder elevate. That's more of a shift. This is more of a flexion. Remember the gentleman with all the black shorts and black shirt? That was the lateral shift. A lateral flexion, again, is just this. So lateral flexion left, you're more than likely going to see the left scapula depressed. If it's a shift, then you may see it level, or this left side might be higher. Bonus question. What was it on this one? Has one arm with excessive pronation. What do you think is occurring at the ipsilateral scapula? So in this particular, they said, what was the answer on this one? Ipsilateral scapula would be abducted. So ipsilateral, so that's, so on that one, excessive pronation, more than likely, when you see the arm, just remember this is a bonus question, this is more for level 4, but if you see the pronation of the arm, more than likely, that scap's going to be abducted as well. And this one, got number 6. Number 8, third reason. This one, number 8 says, if someone has a depressed scapula, list 3 possible deviations that could cause the depression. May include the pelvis. This person put an elevated hip. They also put a lateral flexion of the torso and scoliosis. Yeah, scoliosis could be the answer. I was looking something more specific as far as what we were teaching in the course. So scoliosis could be one, but elevated hip, lateral flexion, and then really what we were talking about more was looking at a torso rotation. But scoliosis is the right answer. I just wanted to kind of expand on that one a little bit more. And then this, number 7. So on this one, this was question 7. It said, if someone has a rotation of the torso, list 2 possible pelvic deviations. One would be a rotation away from the torso rotation. So if the torso is rotated right to left, the pelvis may be rotated left to right. So that was good. A second reason would be a pelvic elevation where the torso may rotate towards the elevation to help restore tilt or to relieve tension from the scapula. Usually what happens is usually with the elevation, usually the torso is going to rotate away from the elevated side, not toward it. There's always going to be those exceptions, but remember we're talking more generally. So there was more of an elevation and then a rotation away. So if I was elevated right, more than likely going to be a slight rotation away from the elevated side. And then we had number 11. One more here, guys. So list the possible torsal deviations that could cause an elevated scapula. This particular person put kyphosis, flexion, and lateral flexion. Well, flexion, I'm assuming this person actually meant thoracic flexion, unless they meant cervical flexion. So if it was thoracic flexion, then you're going to be elevated scapula. If it was cervical flexion, which I'm not sure if this person meant that, but I'm assuming now, reading it again, that it was. So with cervical flexion, you may be forward, and that kind of brings them forward as well. And then the other one would be lateral flexion. But lateral flexion would be more unilateral versus bilateral dysfunction. So that's it, guys. Overall, awesome job. Everyone did pass, and everyone got almost them all right, which was awesome. And also, Tom, good job, because I know this was your first deal. You didn't get to experience the pelvis, so good job on that. So stay tuned next week. We'll start covering more of the case studies, and I'll start going over more of those specific deviations. So make sure you keep posting on the member site. All right, bye-bye.